In a Capitol hearing watched by millions, Jasmine Crockett faces Donald Trump. 3 envelopes, 1 blank signature, and a 15-second reply flip the room upside down. When the real test is character, not IQ, who will stand and who will fall. Stay with us. This is a story worth every second of your time. The U.S. Capitol burned with white light, every seat taken, every lens pointed forward. Reporters were packed shoulder to shoulder, the entire nation locked in, as if the room itself was a cage for 2 fighters. At one end sat Jasmine Crockett, young sharp, her red folder glowing like a live charge, the symbol of truth she carried. Across the table lounged Donald Trump, confident as ever, wearing the smirk of a man who believed the cameras were his to command. He had called himself a very stable genius, so many times it now echoed like armor around him. Trump leaned into the microphone, voice booming with arrogance. "She's low IQ, very low. I've taken the real test, the serious one, and I passed like the genius I am. Let's settle this right now, an IQ test here in front of everyone." Gasps and nervous laughter cracked through the chamber, the trap set like a blade. Jasmine didn't blink. She raised her chin, her voice sharp as glass. "No, Mr. Trump, the real test isn't IQ, it's integrity quotient, and that is the test you cannot escape." From the moment the gavel fell, the energy turned electric. Trump leaned into the mic like a boxer over the ropes, savoring the noise. He flashed that practiced grin and said, "She's low IQ, very low, the lowest you'll ever see." Then he thumped the table with an open palm. "I've taken the real test, the serious one, and I passed like a genius." Snickers popped around the room as if the verdict had already landed. Jasmine Crockett did not move. Her red folder rested under her fingers like a live wire waiting to speak. She lifted the cover and slid out 3 slim envelopes, each stamped in black block letters, "Truth Duty Limits." Her voice was level, the kind that made a loud room lean in. "You want an IQ show," she said, "but the people at home need a different test." She tapped the first envelope and read clearly, "Have you ever lied to the public for personal gain?" She tapped the second, "Have you ever placed your own interest above the national interest?" She tapped the third. "Do you respect the limits of power, even when those limits cost you?" Trump gave a chuckle that tried to sound easy and came out like a growl. "Cute envelopes," he said, "but I negotiate real deals. I run crowds. I make things happen." He talked about ratings, the economy, the enemies, the fake news, a swirl of boasts that never touched the questions. He raised his hands to the light, saying, "Look at this room, look at the love. This is what leadership looks like." But not once did he say yes, and not once did he say no. It was a dance around the edge of a cliff, all spin and no step toward the ground. Truth. Jasmine clicked a pen and wrote on a single line card large enough for every camera to catch. "No admission, no commitment, evasive." She set the card upright beside the envelopes, like a scoreboard that refused to blink. "These are yes or no questions," she said, "and the country deserves yes or no answers." The room tightened as if a metal cable had been cranked one turn too far. A hush swallowed the whispering rouse. Even the shutters eased, afraid to break the surface. For the first time, he stood inside a question that offered no exit but the truth. Trump tried a swaggering pivot, listing jobs rallies and supposed records, stringing superlatives like firecrackers. Jasmine did not chase the noise. She simply repeated, "Have you ever lied to the public for personal gain?" He answered with a story about ratings and love, but the word no never arrived. She moved to the next envelope, steady as a heartbeat. "Have you ever placed your own interest above the national interest?" He praised his instincts, his deals, his legacy, and left the country waiting for a simple yes or no that never came. On the third envelope, she asked, "Do you respect the limits of power even when those limits cost you?" And the silence after her words was louder than any chant. Cameras inched closer, cables curled underfoot, and the air thinned until every breath sounded like a verdict. Jasmine put both hands on the table and said, "These are basic public questions, and they require basic public answers." She pointed to the card again so the whole country could read it. "No admission, no commitment, evasive." Trump opened his mouth, closed it, then reached for the comfort of applause lines that would not carry him across this gap. The chamber felt like a bridge swaying in high wind, every eye fixed on whether he would step forward or keep dancing at the edge. For once, the slogans were useless, the spotlight a trap, and the man who always controlled the room found himself pinned to a single word he could not say. The gavel hovered, and still no one breathed. Jasmine waited, eyes forward, pen steady above paper. Yes or no, she said, clear, calm now. Trump stared back, searching for a softer door. There wasn't one, only the straight line ahead. For the first time, the escape route vanished, and as the card on the table stared him down, Trump snapped back to seize control's shoulders, squaring in front of a wall of cameras right now. He leaned over the microphone like a showman, reclaiming the stage, and announced an IQ round under the hard white glare to a hush that felt staged and dangerous. First, he said 3 factories double output after cutting half the workers tell me the exact % increase in productivity per worker. Second, he continued, complete the pattern, 1, 1, 2, 3, 5, 8. What comes next and why? Third, his voice boomed in a head-to-head negotiation, where the opponent concedes with probability P each round. What is the winning strategy to maximize expected value? He spread his hands to the light, certain the room would watch her stumble on the math. The logic in the odds, palms open to the ceiling, playing to the rafters. Jasmine kept her eyes steady and did not reach for a pen, breath steady and unhurried, like a held note before impact. I won't play a talent show with people's lives, she said, refusing the bait without raising her voice, letting the sentence land like a slap. She tapped the first envelope and shifted the frame with a cut as clean as glass, turning every lens in the room. Production is not just a number, it is also the people who lose their jobs. Your factory riddle erases faces, mortgages, and medicine, turning families into decimals, so you can clap at the answer, she said on cue. If a leader solves a sum by firing the very workers who carry the load, the result is not intelligence, it is amputation, she added, calling the harm by its name. She turned to the second envelope, and the chamber leaned in a fraction more, as if gravity increased, drawing eyes to the envelopes like magnets. A sequence cannot be the rule of democracy. Democracy is not 1, 1, 2, 3, 5, 8. It is voices, rights, guardrails, and consent, none of which repeat on schedule, she said, in real time. You can predict the next digit. You cannot predetermine the will of a people without breaking the very system you claim to lead, she added, without consent. Government is not a staircase of pretty numbers, she added. It is the messy proof that every citizen counts before any pattern, before any tidy formula. The Fibonacci spiral collapsed into the simple demand that leaders answer to humans, not to sequences, full stop. She touched the third envelope and let a beat of silence expose the trap in his final puzzle, letting the hush stretch. Negotiation is not to win. It is so that no one loses. If you design strategy only to crush an opponent, you forget the contract that survives after the cameras turn off. She said, the kind that binds when the lights dim. The best expected value is a country where the loser still has a future, because that is the only deal that keeps the peace. She continued, spelling it out in plain, hard math. She slid the envelopes forward like sliding back the stage lights and said, after your 3 questions, here's mine. When truth hurts your power, what do you choose? Her words landed with the click of a lock. The room felt the door behind him close as if pulled from the hinges, and the witnesses felt it too. Trump pivoted into airs and thunder, talking about crowds, ratings, victories, and enemies, never touching the edge of the question, words thinning like smoke and refusing to settle anywhere. He praised his instincts and mocked her calm, stitched-together superlatives, and promised that strength means never blinking, as if bravado could substitute for answers. He would not say truth, he would not say power, he would not admit the price when those two collide, not today. Jasmine let the silence do the counting. The math could not then raise the cards so the cameras could read her verdict, the paper steady and final. Then let history grade it. The sentence fell like a stamp on wet paper, sealing the moment without another word, ink drying in the open. And with the room holding its breath, Jasmine changed the game again, clean and fast for everyone watching. She drew a single sheet from her red folder and laid it flat under the lights, the title centered in bold, honor affirmation, 4 ethical commitments. The paper looked simple, almost ordinary, but the tension around it made the page feel hot. Cameras crept in, Microphones seemed to lean for the first syllable. Jasmine kept her voice even, steady and clear, the kind of tone that cuts through noise. She said, "This is not a trap or a prosecution. It is a mirror." Across the table, Trump adjusted his cuffs and watched with a half smile, as if mirrors were props meant for other people. No drama, no flourish, just ground rules. She read the 4 lines slowly, one by one, letting each sentence land like a gavel. "I will not place myself above the law. I will not use power to avenge. I will not distort the truth for image. I will admit fault when I am wrong." The phrases were short, plain, and impossible to hide behind. They did not accuse, they required. A ripple moved through the press row, the kind that says everybody heard the same thing at once. The room held the echo, as if the walls themselves had signed. Jasmine slid a pen across the table and placed it beside the signature line, the motion neat and deliberate. "Sign this as a non-binding, simulated pledge," she said, "not to bind your legal rights, but to bind your conscience." She did not raise her voice. She raised the stakes. Trump leaned forward, eyes bright, and laughed into the mic. "I don't sign cheap poetry," he said, waving a hand as if shooing a fly. "I make real deals, big ones, and I don't answer to paper sermons." The chamber jolted, not with noise, but with the sudden drop in temperature that follows a pulled knife. Jasmine did not react. She wrote on a large card in block letters and set it upright for the cameras to capture. The card read, "Refuse to affirm 4 basics." She underlined it once slow, then folded her hands. Reporters froze between frames, the public record hardening in real time. Around the dais, you could feel the audience registering the gap between the hero stories and the no-ink line that sat there like a quiet accusation. Jasmine spoke plainly, each phrase trimmed to the bone. "These are the floor, not the ceiling," she said. "This page does not accuse you, it invites you." She turned the paper so the audience could see the 4 lines again under the bright wash of light. "Not above the law, not using power to avenge, not distorting the truth for image, admitting fault when wrong." Trump stared at the pen as if it were a camera he could switch off, then looked past it and reached for applause lines that would not come. She did not push. She waited, which was worse. The silence wrapped the table like plastic, tight and airless. Every viewer at home could read the distance between the mouth that said strength and the hand that would not sign 4 basic sentences. The moderators did not rescue him. The staff did not interject. The moment sat there solid and heavy because it was simple. Jasmine kept her eyes level and said, "The record will note the refusal." Trump shrugged, but the shrug sounded hollow without the shelter of a crowd. Outside the frame, the country felt the shift, not as a shout, but as a weight settling. It was the first time many had seen the gap so clear between the legend of strength and the unwillingness to honor the smallest civic oath. No chart, no chant, no nickname could paste over the blank line where a signature might have gone. The page was still only paper, the pledge only symbolic, yet the refusal drew its own hard outline. Jasmine set the pen down gently and did not gloat. The facts were louder than any celebration. The cameras held the shot, showing the empty space like a bruise on clean skin. With the pen still untouched, Jasmine shifted from the pledge to its price. She said, "Let me give 3 plain hypotheticals so the country knows what this page is for." First, a leader massages numbers he knows are wrong, glossing over bad data to look strong on TV. On paper, the deficit shrinks. The charts smile, the speechwriters cheer. In life, the clinic runs out of insulin, the school loses its nurse, the storm fund arrives a month too late. He calls it polishing. The families call it panic. That is what a lie buys: a few shiny headlines and a long sick night for parents counting pills. Second, a leader stretches power until the guardrails bend. He fires the inspector who asks hard questions, yanks permits from a contractor who refused a photo op, and tells agencies to remember who's in charge. No law is openly broken. He just makes sure every witness feels the chill. By year's end, watchdogs are gone, whistleblowers are quiet, and the message is stamped across every memo: loyalty beats legality. He calls it strength. The Constitution calls it a crack that becomes a fault line. Once that habit forms, the house doesn't fall with a crash, it sags, and ordinary people get crushed in the slow collapse. Third, a leader chooses his interest over the public's and calls it necessary pragmatism. He steers contracts to friends who flatter him, delays repairs that do not draw cameras, and spends emergency money on ads that mention his name. Payrolls shrink so a stock chart can jump. The factory town learns to say goodbye on Fridays. A mother studies the bus schedule after closing. A nurse works a toll booth guard, watches a semi-thrum across a bridge overdue for bolts. This is not abstract, Jasmine said, tapping the table. The equation is your child's inhaler, your shift the bridge you cross in the rain. When leaders hide cost behind clever language, people pay it in hours, in bills and breaths. Trump laughed into the mic, trying to cut the wire with a joke and a shrug. You're a politician too. You like TV ratings too, he said, spreading his hands to invite the room back into his rhythm. Jasmine reached into the red folder and produced a second copy of the pledge already signed in thick blue ink beside her printed name. She held it to the cameras so the living rooms could read each line and said, "I sign because I bind myself. No court orders me here. I order me here." She added, laying the signed sheet on the center line between their microphones. The message was simple enough for a kitchen table and sharp enough for a hearing promises count when you can be punished by them. Trump looked at the blank line on his copy like a stare he could outlast, and the silence rushed in as if someone opened a door to winter. A camera tightened on his face while the monitors kept Jasmine's signature in the corner, a split screen built for comparison. His jaw went still, the smile loosened, and the chin set the way it does when instinct says move, but pride says wait. He did not sign, he did not speak, and for a moment the crowd noises from other arenas felt 1,000 miles away. The instant regret didn't shout. It surfaced as a flat gaze. A breath stalled a blink that took one beat too long. Jasmine didn't gloat. She just let the record sit there, a quiet line of ink beside a quiet line of nothing. Across the country, living rooms leaned forward not for the spectacle but for the mirror it held. In a kitchen lit by a bulb, a mother touched a pill bottle and mouth lied about numbers. In a break room that smelled like coolant, a machinist pictured the time card cuts hidden inside that word productivity. At a toll plaza, a night guard looked up and saw the answer hit the bridge. Nobody needed subtitles. The empty signature translated perfectly into every language of consequence. The camera stayed on his face, and the nation understood what it was seeing. With the unsigned lines still staring from the table, Jasmine shifted the spotlight with a single surgical move. She tapped a remote, and the hearing screens went black, except for one sentence in white. When does truth become so inconvenient that we throw it away? The words hung there like a countdown ticking in every living room. No charts, no footnotes, no escape hatch, just a question that sliced through the noise. "Answer this and the rest answers itself," she said, letting the silence carry the weight. Cameras tightened. Even the air felt like it leaned closer to read. She lifted her hand and told a plain, hard story. A mayor polishes a safety report he knows is bad, calls it an update, and smiles through a press conference. Budgets breathe easier on paper while inspections get delayed and bolts don't get replaced. Years pass, storms come, traffic thickens, and one gray morning the bridge groans and folds. Sirens try to outrun gravity, they can't. Later the mayor says we relied on the data, but the data was the lie he dressed up. Jasmine faced the room, voice steady and low. A little lie today, paid for with lives tomorrow. She let the lines settle like dust after a collapse. This is not ideology, it's physics. Steel and concrete obey truth, not slogans. If you sell comfort now by hiding risk, the bill arrives in blood, she said, and the gallery did not dare to breathe. She slid the pledge back across the table one last time, the pen aligned with the signature line like a runway at dusk. "Sign," she said, "nothing more, nothing less." Trump stared at the paper, then into the cameras and said no. Jasmine nodded once and wrote into the record, refusal noted. The lens found the empty line and would not look away. The blank space spoke louder than any speech, and in that quiet it became the strongest proof in the room. With the blank signature still burning on the monitors, the chair called for closing remarks, and the chamber tightened like a drum. Reporters leaned in cords and tripods tangled underfoot, trying not to blink. The air felt electric, the kind that makes skin prickle before a storm. Jasmine kept both hands on the table, steadied the red folder at her right like a signal flare. Trump rolled his shoulders once and squared to the microphones, face lifted into the lights as if they were old friends. The room froze, waiting for the final blows. Trump went first, punching each word as if to break through the cameras. People need a winner. I will not sign a meaningless paper. The sentences hit the marble and bounced sharp, familiar, designed to rally rather than answer. He spread his hands to the crowd that wasn't there, as if applause could arrive by memory alone. He talked about victory, strength, and being built for the moment, his voice swelling to fill every gap. The pen lay untouched at the line, a small object suddenly louder than the speech. Jasmine stood without rushing, drawing the silence toward her like a tide. She met his eyes and spoke clean. No ornaments, no heat, just hard truth. Beating others is easy. Beating yourself is hard. The words slid through the room like a blade that didn't need to shout to cut. Leadership is not the trick of winning the angle. It is the courage to hold the line on yourself, she said, and the microphones caught every syllable. The distance between the two of them, no more than a table's width, felt like a canyon. She let that hang one breath, then gave the line the nation already knew by heart. The most important test is character. You have failed. It took exactly the time it needed, and not a second more. The split screen tightened on one side, Jasmine still centered. On the other, Trump's smile falling out of his face as if the power had been cut. His jaw, set eyes flicked, the practiced grin tried to return and could not find its footing. No one said gotcha. No one needed to. The camera did not blink, and neither did the country. The gavel rose and fell crisp as a door latch, and the hearing was done. Trump gathered his papers without a word, turned from the microphones, and walked for the exit, footsteps loud in the sudden quiet. No wave, no aside, just the straight line of a man leaving before the stillness could say more. Jasmine did not watch him go. She closed her pen, stacked her notes, and pulled the red folder close. She laid her palm on its cover and pressed firm and final as if closing a door that needed to stay shut. The shot held there, hand folder light, until the screen faded to black. When the screen faded to black, the clip did not die, it exploded into a second life. It raced from newsroom feeds to living rooms and factory break rooms, from classroom projectors to phones clutched on late buses. The edit everyone shared was brutal in its clarity. 3 envelopes on the table, the clean 15-second conclusion, and the white page with no signature. No narration, no spin, just the hard cut between what was asked and what was refused. People watched it twice, then 3 times, as if replay could change the ending, and as if the ending was a mirror held up to them. Editors online began slicing the moment into tight surgical beats meant to land like punches. One version froze on the envelopes and stamped the words truth, duty, limits across the frame in stark black type. Another held the precise second when the 15-second line dropped, and the grin slipped the room's oxygen, falling with it. A third pushed in on the blank signature line until the fibers of the paper felt like a bruise under glass. No voiceover could compete with that quiet image, so most versions let the silence talk. In kitchens at midnight, mothers paused by a pill bottle and rewound the clip at the part where budgets were dressed up and bridges went down. In a garage that smelled of oil, a mechanic wiped his hands and said, "That's my shift in those numbers they polished." At a toll booth, a night guard watched a replay and glanced up at the steel above the lanes, counting bolts like prayers. In a crowded bus aisle, a nurse leaned into her phone and whispered, "Say it plain, truth, duty, limits," as if the 3 words were a checklist before dawn. People began to feel the math on their skin. Teachers moved first because schools always absorb the weather of a country. A civics teacher printed a simple sheet with 3 plain lines and the header, truth, duty, limits, then asked her class to write 1 example of each in their daily life. Another teacher took the 15-second conclusion and put it on the board next to the Pledge of Allegiance, not to worship it, but to weigh it. Students argued about fairness, about courage, about the cost of a word like no. They did not memorize a speech. They practiced saying "I was wrong" out loud. The room felt like a drill for a fire that everyone knew would come. On the factory floor, the foreman pinned a card above the clock that read, "Truth, duty, limits" in thick marker. Truth, log every near miss. Duty, stop the line if a guard is loose no matter who is watching. Limits, no overtime past the safety cap, even if a bonus is on the other side. At first it felt like a slogan. Then a man looked down at the scar on his forearm and nodded to nobody. The cards stayed up because the machines had long memories. Hospitals are built on pressure, and the pressure made the lesson land fast. A triage nurse taped a small sign at intake: truth, duty, limits, then told her team what it meant in plain words. Truth tell families real wait times, not the easy version. Duty move the sickest first even when a voice shouts at the desk. Limits, no one overrides medication protocols, not even if they wear a title on their chest. The staff did not clap. They just breathed easier because the rules were now printed where everyone could see them. The clip played in the break room without sound, and no one needed volume to understand. City halls began to test the new weather with small acts that looked big because they were simple. A mayor stood at a thin podium and read a 4-line pledge, then signed it with a pen that did not shake. I will not place myself above the law. I will not use power to avenge. I will not distort the truth for image. I will admit fault when I am wrong. He called it a personal promise, not a law, and taped a copy to the door of his office where the public line formed. Within a week, 2 neighboring towns followed and a map began to glow with little dots of ink. The corporate world is allergic to mirrors, but some CEOs understand what a market hates even more: hidden cracks. A chief executive called her board into a brief meeting, slid a 4-line pledge across the table, and signed it before anyone could turn it into a debate. She added a short memo: truth, no massaging earnings. Duty, protect jobs when cash allows. Limits, no favoritism in bids. Fault, say it and fix it fast. Procurement posted the new rules. Legal opened a plain channel for flagging pressure from above. And the stock did not crash because investors prefer quiet honesty over loud surprise. Employees screenshotted the signature and sent it to each other with a simple caption: we bind ourselves. Principals took their cue from the kids who had already learned to speak the 3 words. An assembly gathered in a gym that smelled of floor wax and chalk, and the principal read the pledge without drama. This is not about punishment, she said. This is about practice. She signed, the vice principal signed, the student council signed, and a copy went up next to the bell schedule. All week, classrooms opened with a 1-minute check. What is one truth we won't bend today? What is one duty we won't dodge? And what is one limit we will keep even if it costs us? The questions were small enough to fit in a backpack. Neighborhoods made the idea useful in the way neighborhoods always do, by putting it on the counter where life happens. A barber taped truth, duty, limits to his mirror and said, truth, the price is the price. Duty, show up. Limits, 1 no-show and you pay up front. A pastor preached the 3 words as a promise, not a threat, then asked the church board to sign the simple pledge and post it by the door. A corner store wrote the words on a chalkboard under today's special, and customers smiled because the rules were finally the same in the places that kept them fed. None of it felt like politics. It felt like weather clearing after a long season of fog. The media did what media does, but for once the noise bent towards something clean. Morning shows ran side-by-side comparisons, IQ test trivia on one panel, the blank signature line on the other. Commentators tried to explain why the 15-second conclusion landed harder than 1,000 speeches, and the answer was not complicated. People are tired of cleverness without cost. Across channels, hosts began to repeat the new line with a careful tone: IQ is not enough, we need integrity quotient. The phrase found its own gravity and stopped sounding like a slogan because it kept pointing back to choices with weight. Online, the 3 words turned into a checklist that spread faster than snark. Parents printed wallet cards that read truth and duty, limits, and asked their kids to sign them next to a little space for today's date. A contractor put the words at the top of every bid and found clients asking fewer trick questions because the rules had already been set in daylight. A dispatcher added the 3 words to the top of a shift sheet and watched call response times improve because duty, once named, is hard to avoid. It was not magic. It was friction applied in the right places. The clip kept playing and the country kept practicing. In small offices with thin walls, managers began to test the pledge when it pinched. A team lead told his staff, truth, we missed the target. Duty, we fix it together. Limits, no lying up the chain. He signed a 4-line promise and put it in the weekly email, then did something rarer: he followed it when his own numbers went soft. In a union hall, a representative read the same lines and said, "If they sign, fine. If they won't, we still will." On a courthouse lawn, a public defender taped the words to a clipboard and said them to a client who could not make eye contact. The point was never who said them first. The point was that the words stuck. By the end of the week, the three pictures from the clip had settled into the public nerve like three notes from a score. The envelopes told people what the test was. The 15 seconds told them how fast the truth can cut when it is aimed well. The blank page told them that refusal is also an answer, and sometimes the loudest one. None of this needed a hero. It needed a habit. That is why the phrase held IQ is not enough, we need integrity quotient. The lesson kept its edge because it came attached to a bill everyone recognized. A high IQ can solve puzzles and stack trophies. It cannot bolt a bridge with a fake report. A high IQ can win an argument and bury a problem. It cannot make an insulin refill appear when a lie erased the budget. A high IQ can move a crowd with bright words. It cannot repair the trust that breaks when power is used to settle a score. Integrity is not a flare, it is a floor. Truth, duty, limits is how you test whether the floor will hold. And so the clip kept moving through the country like a quiet siren that people learned to hear. Some mayors, some CEOs, some principals signed a 4-line promise because they understood that a public oath, even when non-binding, binds the person who means it. Families built little rituals around 3 plain words because rituals are how groups remember what they decided to be. The phrase integrity quotient stopped being clever and started being a rule of thumb called out when a choice hurt and a shortcut tempted. No one cared who said it first. What mattered was that it fit in a pocket and could be said without a microphone. The clip burned fast, but the aftermath moved like weather, changing the air people breathed and the ground they walked on. What began as 3 envelopes, a 15-second sentence, and a white page without a signature turned into a measuring stick everyone could carry. You could feel it in city halls, locker rooms, school corridors, and late-night kitchens where bills were stacked like dominoes. The country had seen the test, and the country didn't forget. From that moment, the question wasn't who could talk louder, but who would answer cleaner. In politics, the center of gravity shifted toward the smallest words on the ballot. Yes or no town halls started setting clocks and asking one-line questions with a buzzer at the end, because time is honest when words are not. Do you support public disclosure of safety inspections, yes or no? Will you recuse yourself when family money is involved? Yes or no candidates learned that a paragraph can hide a dodge, but a syllable cannot. Crowds began to cheer for the brave. Yes, in the hard. No more than for the clever. Let me explain. Committee rooms picked up the same rhythm, turning hearings into clean lanes instead of verbal traffic jams. Staffers drafted binders with columns labeled question answer and a blank square for yes/no chairs, stopped letting filibusters float on forever, and started cutting to the line. This is a yes/no when the dance resumed, because the dance always tries to resume. Members held up cards that read, "Answer the question." A new tradition formed on the dais, the truth clock, a simple timer that didn't forgive stall tactics. The public learned to watch the seconds like they were watching a fuse. Campaigns adapted because survival demands it. Debate prep divided into 2 drills, the elevator answer and the oath answer. The elevator answer fit a floor-to-floor ride. The oath answer fit a pledge that could cost votes. Consultants once paid to craft fog discovered that clean air pays better when the wind changes. Candidates who couldn't say yes, no, learned to carry the stain of silence. Candidates who could learn that clarity draws unlikely allies. The lesson bit deep: power that won't commit cannot be trusted. In the economy, the numbers now had faces and productivity lost its mask. Shop floors started adding a 4th box to performance dashboards: human impact. If a plan doubled output by cutting the crew in half, managers had to list the lost hours, the lost health, and the lost skills in the same font as the gains. Meetings got blunt. This plan looks efficient on paper and cruel in life. Boards asked a new question before greenlighting a strategy: whose body pays for this spike? Profit still mattered, but it no longer got to pretend it was a neutral god. Factories tested a different kind of math, where prevention counts as production and safety is a line item, not a footnote. Truth meant reporting near misses without fear. Duty meant stopping a line when a guard wobbled. Limits meant no bonus for meeting a goal by burning people out. The union hall and the front office found a rare point of contact in three shared words. When the chart went up without hidden cuts, morale followed and turnover stopped, draining the budget in slow motion. Executives discovered what workers always knew: trust is the cheapest retention program on earth. Small businesses translated the shift into plain rules that fit onto receipts and chalkboards. A contractor wrote truth, duty, limits at the top of every bid, then listed, "We won't cut corners you can't see, even if nobody checks." A restaurant posted truth, no fake market price, duty, serve staff meals before closing, limits, no double shifts without rest. Customers felt the difference without needing a brochure. Cash drawers don't lie when people come back because they believe you. In education, integrity quotient stepped out of a hearing room and walked into civics class. Teachers designed a unit called the Four Lines. Built around one assignment: write your own pledge and live by it for a week. Kids practice saying "I was wrong" and learn that this sentence feels heavy until it starts to feel like air. They role-played council meetings where the chair always asked yes, no, then graded each other on clarity, not on charm. The lesson stuck because it came with a cost and a mirror. High schools spread the practice to student government, where the temptation to fudge is born early. Candidates signed four-line promises before running for treasurer, then faced a truth audit at semester's end. Did you post every receipt, yes or no? Did you give your opponents equal poster space? Yes or no? Those who broke the pledge stood up and said "I was wrong," then fixed it in public. The applause that followed wasn't for perfection, it was for repair. Universities pulled the thread through professional schools where consequences get real. In engineering labs, professors pinned a photo of a bridge and wrote in chalk steel, "Obeys truth, not slogans." Students signed the four-line pledge before touching structural models because shortcuts don't hold weight. Med schools added a live drill, a simulated shift where the easiest lie could speed things up and the honest delay could save a life. Business schools introduced human-first productivity, grading leaders on the invisible costs they refused to hide. Integrity quotient stopped sounding like a category and started sounding like a standard. The media learned to place silence beside speech and let the gap teach. News shows began running split screens where the question stayed frozen while the answer tried to wander away. The lower third changed too. Asked, yes, no answered. Producers cut the orchestra and let the mic pick up the seconds. Audiences learned to feel when a Dodge ran out of gas. Commentary sharpened, not by adding heat, but by measuring courage. He said, "No, and here is why that costs him." She said yes, and here is what it binds her to. Journalists borrowed the hearing's clean tools and left the tricks on the shelf. They carried pocket cards that read truth, duty, limits, and used them to frame interviews. Truth: what fact will you accept that hurts your case? Duty: what will you do that your base hates but your country needs limits? What power will you refuse to use, even when you can? The best guess answered. The worst guess learned the cost of airtime that records your evasion forever. The public, tired of noise, rewarded shows that counted answers instead of counting crosstalk. Even social media, that amplifier of chaos, absorbed a new habit because audiences demanded it. A trend called the one-word challenge took off. Creators posted a hard question and waited for guests to answer with yes or no on camera. Edits highlighted the blink before the word and the breath after it, because truth lives in that tight space. Memes built around the blank signature became a shorthand for "won't commit," and timelines punished the dodge more than the disagreeable. The mute button turned into a test. If the sound is off and the answer is still clear, you are doing journalism right. All of this filtered down into homes because homes are where countries actually change. Families printed the four-line pledge and stuck it to refrigerators next to chore lists. "I will not place myself above the law" became "I won't break house rules because I'm older." "I will not use power to avenge" became "no payback pranks." "I will not distort the truth for image" became "no excuses that blame the dog." "I will admit fault when I am wrong" stayed the same because the truth needs no translation. Dinner tables turned into practice fields for words that once felt too heavy for a weeknight. Workplaces followed in small, stubborn ways that lasted. Teams opened stand-ups with a 30-second integrity quotient check: one truth, we won't bend today; one duty, we won't dodge; one limit, we'll keep even if it costs us. Supervisors started keeping two lists: wins and repairs. Promotions stopped rewarding the people who always looked right and started rewarding the people who made things right. That shift bled into performance reviews, contracts, and how resignations were written. "I was wrong, I fixed it" became a line you could be proud of. Civic life found a crisp question that echoed across scales from the Capitol to cul-de-sacs. Neighborhood associations asked it before votes about budgets and playgrounds. Nonprofits asked it before grants with strings that pulled the wrong way. Coaches asked it in locker rooms. Choir directors asked it before competitions. Volunteers asked it behind folding tables at food banks. The words never change because the test never changes. Can I sign the four-line pledge? Some push back because power never yields without noise. "It's performative," they said, pointing at signatures under glass. The answer came quiet, and practical performance is how humans remember what they promised when pressure rises. A signature under glass is not a badge. It is a trap you set for your future self so you can't wriggle out later. The country did not become perfect. It became practiced. Practice, not purity, is how democracies survive their storms. Elections started to feel different, not because parties changed, but because questions did. Voters carried index cards into town halls and read them into microphones that used to be for rants. Would you release your meetings with lobbyists, yes or no? Will you reject PAC money tied to your committee's work? Yes or no. If you lose, will you concede, yes or no? Candidates learned that courage on the front end beats chaos on the back end. The ballot box stayed the same size, but what people slid into it carried more weight. Budgets shifted along the fault lines revealed by those three words. Cities funded bridge inspections before ribbon cuttings because steel keeps score. States put human impact statements next to cost projections, treating exhaustion, attrition, and accident risk as real math. The federal government, slow, stubborn, and eventually teachable, added integrity quotient criteria to grants that touch safety, transparency, and rights. Money follows rules, rules follow pain, pain follows lies. The cycle began to break where the new questions took root. The storm seasons that came after told their own hard truths. Emergency plans with glossy covers and fake numbers fell apart on contact with wind, water, and heat. But plans built with truth, duty limits held better truth in forecasts, duty to the most vulnerable limits on shortcuts that would kill later. After-action reports used to be burial shrouds for failure. Now they became living documents read aloud at town meetings. "We were wrong here" turned into "we will fix it by next season," and people believed it because they saw it cost someone something. And through all of it, the private question kept returning, small and sharp, like a key in a pocket. People asked it before they posted, before they signed, before they shouted, before they chose. "Can I sign the four-line pledge?" If the answer was no, they either changed the choice or admitted the truth. Both actions beat the old habit of pretending. If the answer was yes, they signed on paper, on email, on breath, and took whatever came next. The country learned to live with a mirror it could carry and a test it could give itself over and over without waiting for a hearing room to open. The dust of the hearing had settled, but the aftershocks reached into every corner of American life. It was no longer just a story about two figures locked in combat under glaring lights. It had become a question every person carried home. And the proof of that change showed up not in marble halls or television studios, but in the small places where ordinary people live. In a quiet rural town, a new steel bridge stretched across a wide river, the kind of structure that carried buses, trucks, and generations. But this time, something different stood at the entrance. A simple metal board bolted high for all to see listed the date of the last inspection and the name of the engineer who signed it. No jargon, no hidden codes, just plain language. Families stopped to read it, even if they had crossed the bridge 100 times before. The board was no decoration, it was a public promise. One afternoon, a mother and her young son paused at the sign. The boy tilted his head, squinting at the unfamiliar letters. "Why is their name up there?" he asked. The mother rested her hand on his shoulder and pointed. "Because when you sign your name, you remember that you've promised to keep people safe. If they lie, if they fake it, this bridge won't hold." The boy's eyes widened as if the entire weight of the bridge now depended on honesty. "Does that mean they could forget?" he whispered. She nodded gently. "That's why they write it down so they don't." For that child, the lesson was stronger than the concrete beneath his feet. While ordinary people absorbed the meaning of signatures, another scene unfolded far away in a private room with no cameras, no chance, no stage. Donald Trump stood before a mirror. The reflection was familiar: tie, straight hair, arranged posture, rehearsed, but the silence was not. For decades, applause had been his oxygen, a crowded shield. Now in the stillness, there was nothing to bounce off, nothing to drown out the quiet question rising inside. How many times had he won the crowd but lost to himself? He lifted his chin, trying to summon the grin that once conquered stadiums, but it faltered halfway. The mirror stared back, merciless and plain. He adjusted his cuffs, straightened his tie, but the face in the glass refused to cooperate. Every dodge, every boast, every laugh line evaporated in the emptiness of that room. He had thundered about winners and losers, but now the unspoken truth settled heavy on his shoulders. The hardest opponent is the one inside. For the first time, there was no exit line, no clever escape. Only the tally of battles he had never won against himself. While he wrestled with that silence outside the walls, the public was already moving. It started with young people restless and raw, tired of watching promises evaporate in smoke. On campuses and in basements, they opened laptops and drafted something they called the Integrity Ledger. It was not a law, not a policy, not even a petition. It was a living document open to anyone, where people could sign their own four-line pledge. I will not place myself above the law. I will not use power to avenge. I will not distort the truth for image. I will admit fault when I am wrong. The words spread faster than gossip. Within days, thousands had uploaded their names, each entry a declaration that didn't wait for Congress, courts, or cameras. I signed, one teenager wrote, because I don't want to forget who I am. Another added, this isn't about them, it's about me. The ledger grew into a mirror the nation could hold up to itself. Each name was a challenge, asking if ordinary citizens can bind themselves. Why can't those who rule? The ripple traveled upward, as ripples do when they gather enough force. In Washington, a subcommittee convened under cold white lights to debate what staffers had begun to call the Minimum Ethics Declaration. It was only 4 sentences, but the simplicity was what made it dangerous. Some lawmakers dismissed it as symbolic. Others bristled, afraid of being forced to answer too plainly. Yet the fact that it was on the agenda at all was historic. One representative said bluntly, if a mayor can sign it, if a CEO can sign it, why can't we? The chamber fell into an uneasy silence. Everyone knew the cameras were rolling, and everyone knew that silence itself would be replayed. The debate grew sharp, some calling it childish, others calling it the floor beneath democracy. Staffers scribbled notes as history bent under 4 plain lines. For the first time in decades, integrity itself, not policy, not party, but integrity, was on the record as something worth voting on. Far from Congress, Jasmine carried the torch into a different arena, a university lecture hall packed with students. The energy was thick, the kind of anticipation that crackles when young people sense they are part of something larger than themselves. She stood at the front not as a politician, but as a witness. Don't ask if you're smart enough, she told them, voice steady and strong. Ask if you're brave enough. The students leaned in silent. Brave enough to tell the truth when it costs you. Brave enough to hold power and not abuse it. Brave enough to say, I was wrong. That's the only exam you'll ever take that matters. Phones recorded, pens scribbled, but what stuck was not the words on paper. It was the weight of the challenge. Some students wiped their eyes quietly. Others nodded with the fierce private determination that turns into future action. The message was not about IQ. It was about courage. Back in her office, Jasmine placed the final seal on the story. Mounted under glass were 3 simple envelopes, each stamped with a single word: truth, duty, limits. They were relics now, but relics that carried more power than a library of speeches. Beneath them hung a sheet of paper. On it were 2 signatures, hers bold and blue, and another from a small-town mayor who had sent his copy by mail with a note: I sign because I bind myself. Visitors who entered the office always paused before the frame. Some looked uncomfortable, some inspired, but none walked past without feeling its gravity. The frame was no decoration, it was a verdict. It declared that the real exam of leadership is not graded by machines, not measured by applause, not marked by pundits. It is measured by mirrors and by ink, by the courage to write your name under words that could hold you accountable. The story had begun as theater, as a clash of ego and wit, but it ended as something quieter, deeper, more permanent. A bridge sign, a boy learning that promises matter. A former president staring at himself without applause. A digital ledger filled with ordinary names. A Congress debating what it had avoided for generations. A classroom of students learning that courage is the only score that counts. In a frame with 3 envelopes and 2 signatures, reminding everyone that the hardest test is not solved by intelligence alone. Because the truth was never about IQ points or clever puzzles. The truth was about whether you could look into a mirror, look at your own name on a page, and know you had kept the promise you made. That is the test that endures. That is the test history remembers. And that is the test no one can fake. So here is where the story hands the pen to you. You watched the clip, you felt the room tighten, and you saw the blank line refuse to lie. It cannot end on a screen. It must live on your table. A call to action is not a speech. It is a small public promise you can actually keep. The rule is simple. Do the next honest thing you can measure. Start now and let the habit outrun the noise. Write your own 4 lines on plain paper, date it, and read it out loud. I will not place myself above the law. I will not use power to avenge. I will not distort the truth for image. I will admit fault when I am wrong. Sign your name beneath those sentences where your eyes cannot avoid them. Carry a small card that says yes or no, and bring it to rooms that drown in speeches. At the school board, ask, will you publish safety audits every quarter? Yes or no. At the council, ask, will you live stream budget workshops? Yes or no. At the utility, ask, will you disclose outage response times? Yes or no. When someone filibusters, hold up the card so the room understands you came for an answer, not a performance. Build a neighborhood integrity board on one page and post it where people pass. Print the 4 lines at the top with a column for names and a column for dates. Rotate one shared duty each month and log the result beside a signature, so promises have footprints. Keep the meeting to 15 minutes because busy is true and excuses are easy. Take a photo of the board and send it to your district office with one sentence: we bind ourselves. If you manage a team, turn stand-ups into steel. Open every day with 3 prompts, 1 truth. We will not bend, 1 duty. We will not dodge, 1 limit. We will not cross, even if it costs us a metric. Write them on the whiteboard before any number goes up. Reward the person who says I was wrong here is the fix, because repair is strength, not shame. Give everyone the right to stop the line for safety, ethics, or legality, and sign your name under that rule. If you teach, turn integrity into homework, you grade gently and take seriously. Ask for a 7-day log, 1 truth told, 1 duty, done, 1 limit held. Run a yes-no drill where 1 student must answer in a word, then explain the cost that follows. Post the 4 lines on the door so every entry is also a reminder. When you make a mistake, say so aloud. That lesson will outlive the unit. Push for public signs that carry real weight. Bridges, boilers, shelters, and labs should post inspection dates and the names that stand behind them. Ask on the record, will you place the signature where citizens can see it? Yes or no request. The last 3 reports, read them in plain language and bring questions to the open meeting. If something looks off, do not rage online first. Ask in public, who signs this now? Make elections, choose courage early while choices can still change. Print 3 questions on a card and ask at every forum. Will you concede if you lose? Yes or no. Will you publish meetings with lobbyists? Yes or no. Will you recuse when family money is at stake? Yes or no record, the 1-word answers and the timestamp, then share them clearly, so facts carry their own weight. Praise candidates who answer cleanly, even when you disagree, because clarity is the floor of trust. Clean your feed like you clean your doorstep. Before you share, ask, is the claim verified, and does it answer a yes-no? If a post dodges the simple question, label it evasive in your head and move on. Share the 15-second rule. If a leader cannot give a 1-word answer to a basic test of honesty, note the refusal and save your breath. Celebrate corrections as wins because repair beats pride every day. Invite nearby leaders to sign the 4 lines where their people can see them. A coach can hang it in the locker room, a pastor can post it in the hall, and a shift supervisor can tape it above the clock. Say, we are not hunting you, we are inviting you. If we can bind ourselves, you can bind yourself. Offer to sign first so the pledge is a mirror, not a dagger. Practice de-escalation that still holds the line when tempers climb. Put the 4 lines on the table before you put your anger on the table. Say, I will not distort the truth for image and describe what happened as if a camera were rolling. Say, I will not use power to avenge and ask what repair looks like. That does not humiliate anyone. Say, I will admit fault when I am wrong and model the sentence others fear to say. Give your promise a place to live, not just a moment to glow. Start a local entry on the integrity ledger with a clipboard if the web is hard, and gather names at the library or market. Return in 1 month to read how pledges held or cracked and list repairs made. So progress has proof. Then face your mirror and ask, can I sign the 4-line pledge and keep it when it hurts? If the answer is no change, one choice tonight. If the answer is yes, sign date, and begin tomorrow with 1 clean, yes, no question. Start a weekly mirror minute that actually happens, not a promise that melts. Pick the same day and time, stand in front of your pledge, and read it once aloud so your mouth remembers what your hand wrote. Text an integrity buddy 3 lines, 1 truth you kept, 1 duty you did, 1 limit you held. If you slipped, write the repair and do it within 24 hours so the lesson does not leak away. Celebrate repairs the way athletes celebrate training, because that is how strength is built. Now take the stage you already own, the small one, with a few faces and real stakes. Speak this script when the moment comes, say it, sign it, show it. Say the truth that costs you, sign the pledge that binds you, and show the receipt that proves you did the work. Do it at the union hall, the clinic desk, the team huddle, the choir rehearsal, and the bus stop bench. There are no saviors coming. There are signatures coming, and one of them is yours. So take a breath and move before the credits roll on your resolve. Grab a sheet, write the 4 lines, and sign where you must see it. Ask 1 clean yes, no within 48 hours, register on the integrity ledger, and invite 1 leader to post a pledge. Teach 1 child the sentence I was wrong, and let them see you use it first when it stings. This is how clips become countries, how rooms turn into standards, and how a blank line becomes a promise, because your name is there, right there tonight. Thank you for watching until this moment and for standing with us on this journey for justice. Your support means everything, like subscribe and turn on notifications so you never miss what's next. And we'd love to hear your thoughts. Leave a comment below and let us know what moved you most in this story. Together, our voices make a difference.